Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive.
Right.
We love to take these deep dives into, really fascinating books. And today we're taking a look at Robert Greene's The Laws of Human Nature.
Yes.
And we've extracted some incredibly insightful tactics, really, for understanding just how people work. And I think even more importantly for our purposes, how to get what you want.
Right.
We're going to be exploring a lot of these tactics. But, one of the examples that I found really fascinating that Greene uses in the book is Lyndon B. Johnson
Yeah.
and how he kind of rose to become this master influencer in the Senate.
Hmm.
Um,
Mm.
so I'd love to kind of hear your take on this whole idea of softening resistance.
Sure.
Because, this is one of the key strategies that Greene talks about.
It's fascinating how Greene uses history and literature to illustrate his points. And so Lyndon B. Johnson is a key example because he went from a frustrated congressman, to a master influencer in the Senate,
Yeah.
and eventually becomes one of the most powerful majority leaders in history. And, what was his secret weapon? It was that he learned to soften resistance.
Okay, so how does that work?
Think about it this way. Most people get defensive when they feel pressured or manipulated.
Right,
They want to feel like they're in control, calling the shots.
right.
Johnson understood this and shifted his approach drastically when he entered the Senate.
Hmm.
He went from, kind of this brash, kind of go-getter to somebody who really was much more interested in the other person.
Oh, so instead of pushing his agenda, he found a way to make people think they were coming up with the ideas themselves.
Exactly.
That's sneaky and brilliant.
Yeah.
How did he pull that off?
He was very good at making people feel good about themselves, and especially those universal needs that we all have this need for: autonomy, our intelligence, and goodness.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for example, early on in his Senate career, he's offered by Senator Tom Connolly a spot on a low-profile committee, one of these committees that nobody really wants to be on.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of, kind of fighting back, he plays it cool. Yeah, yeah, makes light of the situation, acts eager to learn from the older senator.
So he kind of embraces the whole landslide Lyndon nickname that people had given him.
For
From
sure.
that narrow election victory, he turns what could have been like a humiliation into an opportunity to kind of charm his opponents.
Right. He was disarming those who expected, a hothead. They saw instead, a humble colleague ready to contribute. And this laid the groundwork for him to actually later restructure the entire committee system
Wow.
and amass influence strategically.
Talk about playing the long game.
Yeah. But it sounds like it was more than just an act, though he genuinely became a deep listener,
Great.
which is one of Greene's 5 key strategies for influence. So this wasn't just a surface level interaction.
Yeah.
He made a conscious effort to understand the Senate and its players.
Right.
Paying close attention to what his colleagues said, their interests, even their insecurities.
Uh-huh. So how did this deep listening translate into actual influence?
It allowed him to tailor his approach to each individual, speaking directly to their needs and desires.
Right.
Think of it as, a personalized sales pitch, but
Hmm.
for political power.
Okay.
And this was crucial in his relationship with Senator Richard Russell, who eventually became a mentor and champion for Johnson.
So, did he win over Richard Russell with just, flattery or?
It was much more strategic than that.
Okay.
He spent hours with Russell discussing Senate procedures, bonding over shared interests, creating that
Oh.
sense of genuine camaraderie.
Uh-huh.
He even took an interest in baseball, even though he wasn't really a fan at first, just to connect with Russell on a deeper level.
That's commitment.
Right.
That sounds a lot like the infecting them with the proper mood that Greene talks about in the book.
Yeah.
Instead of forcing his own personality onto the situation, he created an environment where Russell felt, comfortable and understood.
Exactly. And that ties into another example that Greene uses, which is Marie de Vianney from
Yeah.
Henry James and the Ambassadors. She's able to captivate people by creating this aura of empathy and understanding,
Right.
making them feel truly seen and heard.
That's powerful.
It is.
So we've got softening resistance, we've got deep listening, we've got infecting with the right mood. I mean, this is fascinating.
Yeah.
What are some of the other strategies that Greene outlines?
Well, remember those universal needs of self-opinion that we discussed?
Yeah.
Well, Johnson was a genius at confirming their self-opinion.
Oh.
People want to feel autonomous, intelligent, and good.
Yeah.
And he was a master at subtly reinforcing those feelings in others.
Right. It's like Tom Sawyer convincing his friends that whitewashing the fence is a privilege.
Exactly.
He's making it seem like it's this amazing opportunity.
Right.
And And Johnson framed his committee assignments in a similar way, right? He made them seem essential for the party, a test for only the most capable senators. And so everyone felt like, they were choosing to give him more power,
Right.
when really he was kind of orchestrating the whole thing.
Yeah, and he was incredibly subtle about it. So take, for example, how he secured those crucial votes.
Okay.
He would often ask other senators for advice. Subtly appealing to their intelligence,
Yeah.
making them feel valued and respected.
Oh, that's smart.
Right. And that reminds me of the story that Green tells of Billy Wilder
Uh-huh.
and how he got Marlene Dietrich to star in his film. Instead of arguing with her, he cleverly let her choose between two less desirable actresses.
Wow.
So she felt like she was making the intelligent decision.
Oh, she's like, oh, yeah, I'm so much better than those two.
Exactly.
Wow.
And so, when it came to appealing to people's sense of goodness, he was always able to connect his requests to a greater cause,
Okay.
like the success of the Democratic Party or the fight against the Republicans.
Right.
He understood that people are more willing to act if they feel like they're doing something noble and meaningful.
Right.
So by confirming their self-opinion, he disarmed their resistance and made them more open to his suggestions.
Wow, that's fascinating. Okay, so what's the next strategy?
The next strategy is allaying their insecurities.
Okay.
And this one requires a bit of finesse.
Mm-hmm.
It's about identifying someone's insecurities without triggering them and offering strategic reassurance to build a strong connection.
Okay, so is that like Lord Chesterfield advising his son to flatter Cardinal Richelieu's vanity about poetry, not
Right.
statecraft?
Exactly.
So you got to find that one area where they're kind of unsure of themselves and just give them that genuine, well-placed compliment.
Right. And remember, sincerity is key.
Right.
People can spot a phony a mile away. So focus on something you genuinely admire about the person, even if it's just a small detail.
Okay.
It goes a long way.
All right, so far we've got softening resistance, deep listening, infecting with the right mood, confirming their self-opinion, and allaying their insecurities. I mean, it's like we're creating this playbook
Yeah.
for how to navigate the human psyche.
Right.
This is incredible. What's that final strategy?
Well, the fifth strategy is arguably the most intriguing.
Oh, okay.
It's
Yeah.
use their resistance and stubbornness.
Wait, so you're saying like instead of trying to get someone to do what you want, you actually use their resistance against them?
That's exactly it. It might sound counterintuitive,
Mm-hmm.
but Green argues that instead of fighting resistance head on, you can actually use it to your advantage.
That sounds like some serious mental judo.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, so you're not opposing force with force. You're actually redirecting their energy towards a desired outcome.
Right.
Are there any like real world examples of this?
Sure. So Green uses the example of a therapist working with a rebellious teenager.
Okay.
Instead of lecturing him about the dangers of drugs or the importance of school, the therapist used the teenager's anger at the principal to motivate him to study.
Oh, wow. So he like channeled that kid's stubbornness into something productive.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
Or consider Milton Erickson's approach to a couple seeking a divorce instead of trying to convince them to stay together.
Yeah.
He used the husband's desire for a friendly divorce
Okay.
to rekindle their passion.
Wow. So he kind of like flipped the script on them.
Yeah, he used their resistance.
That's really clever.
Yeah. Green also mentions Zen master Hakuin,
Oh, yeah.
tricking a miser into discovering the joy of prayer.
I love that story.
It's great.
It's like he framed prayer as this business deal
Yeah.
to appeal to the miser's nature.
Right. And then there's reverse psychology, where encouraging rebellion can actually lead to compliance. So all of these examples show that resistance isn't always a bad thing.
Right.
It could be a powerful tool for influence if you understand how to use it.
Wow. Okay. So we've covered all 5 strategies: softening resistance, deep listening, infecting with the right mood, confirming their self-opinion, and using resistance to your advantage. I mean, this is like a master class in human psychology.
It is.
And I'm already starting to see how these strategies can be applied in so many different areas of life, from personal relationships to professional negotiations to, even just getting your kids to eat their vegetables. I mean, the possibilities are endless. And Green doesn't stop there. He also emphasizes the importance of applying these strategies to ourselves.
Right.
He argues that just as we become physically less flexible with age, our minds can also stiffen. We get set in our ways, less open to new ideas and influences.
Yeah, and, I can definitely relate to that. As you get older, it's easy to get stuck in your routines and habits, and
Yeah.
you kind of fall into that trap of thinking, everything.
Right.
When in reality, there's always so much more to learn.
Yeah, and to be truly influential, You need to cultivate what Green calls a flexible mind.
Right.
And he talks about this Socratic principle, the idea that awareness of our own ignorance
Right.
actually makes us more receptive to learning.
Right. So acknowledging what we don't know
Right.
actually opens us up to new possibilities.
That's such an interesting concept.
Yeah.
What else does Green suggest for developing a flexible mind?
He cites Nietzsche, who recommended approaching new ideas with love and openness
Well,
before criticizing them.
yeah.
It's about fighting that knee-jerk reaction,
Right.
to dismiss anything that challenges our existing beliefs.
Yeah, I think we're all guilty of that from time to time.
Yeah.
We get comfortable in our own little echo chambers, surrounded by people who agree with us, and it's like,
Right.
we don't want to hear anything that might disrupt our carefully constructed worldview.
Exactly. And, if we want to grow and learn,
Right.
we need to be willing to step outside of our comfort zones
Right.
and engage with different perspectives.
Absolutely. And Greenie even challenges us to question our own self-opinion.
Yeah.
Are we truly as autonomous and good
Right.
as we believe? It's a humbling exercise,
It is.
but crucial for personal growth and a more flexible mind.
Right. And, thinking back to Lyndon B. Johnson, he was a master of adapting his approach based on the situation. He could be charming, 1 minute tough the next, always shifting his tactics to achieve his goals.
So he really embodied that flexible mind that Green talks about.
He did.
But it wasn't just about manipulation, though, right?
No.
Like, his effectiveness really stemmed from a genuine passion
Uh-huh.
for the causes that he championed. People sensed his sincerity even when they knew he was playing the game.
Absolutely.
So it's not just about mastering the techniques, it's about aligning those techniques with our values,
Right.
our purpose,
Yeah.
using our influence to make a positive impact.
I agree. And, Green reminds us that influence isn't something that just happens to us.
Right.
We're not passive bystanders. We're active participants. We have the power to shape our own destinies
Right.
and the world around us.
That's what I love about this deep dive. It's so empowering. It's about understanding that intricate dance of influence, not just to get what we want, but to become more conscious and deliberate in our interactions.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that influence is a tool. And like any tool, it can be used for good or for ill.
Right.
The choice is ours.
And, as we wrap up this first part of our exploration of Robert Greene's The Laws of Human Nature,
Yeah.
I want to leave you with this question. What kind of influence do you want to have on the world?
That's a good question.
What legacy do you want to leave behind?
Yeah.
The tools are there, the knowledge is there, the choice is yours.
It is.
We'll be back with part 2 of our deep dive after a quick break.
So, we were talking about this idea of a flexible mind and how important that is for influence. And Green actually takes it a step further.
Yeah.
He argues that just as we become physically less flexible with age, our minds can also stiffen. We get set in our ways, less open to new ideas and influences.
Right. And I can definitely relate to that. As you get older, it's easy to get stuck in your routines and habits.
Right.
And, kind of fall into that trap of thinking, everything.
Yeah. And to be truly influential, we need to cultivate what Green calls a flexible mind.
Okay, so how do we do that?
It starts with self-awareness. We need to recognize our own biases, our blind spots, our resistance to change.
It's like the Socratic principle in action. The more we acknowledge what we don't know,
Right.
the more open we become to learning.
Exactly. And Green suggests that we actively seek out diverse perspectives.
Yeah.
Even those that challenge our own beliefs.
Right.
He actually quotes Nietzsche on this, suggesting we approach new ideas with love and openness, giving them a fair hearing before forming judgments.
I mean, it's so easy to just dismiss anything that contradicts our worldview.
Yeah.
But that really limits our growth, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And Green pushes us even further. He encourages us to question our own self-opinion. Are we truly as autonomous, intelligent, or good as we believe?
It's a humbling exercise.
It is.
But crucial for personal growth and a more flexible mind.
It is. And, thinking back to Lyndon B. Johnson, he was a master of adapting his approach based on the situation. He could be charming, 1 minute tough, the next, always shifting his tactics to achieve his goals.
He really embodied that flexible mind that Green talks about.
He did, but it wasn't just about manipulation though, right?
No, his effectiveness really stemmed from a genuine passion for the causes that he championed. People sensed his sincerity even when they knew he was playing the game.
Absolutely.
So it's not just about mastering the techniques, it's about aligning those techniques with our values,
Right.
our purpose,
Yeah.
using our influence to make a positive impact.
I agree. And, Green reminds us that influence isn't something that just happens to us.
Right.
We're not passive bystanders. We're active participants. You know, we have the power to shape our own destinies
Right.
and the world around us.
That's what I love about this deep dive. It's so empowering.
Yeah.
It's about understanding that intricate dance of influence,
Mhm.
not just to get what we want, but to become more conscious and deliberate in our interactions.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that influence is a tool.
Ah,
And like any tool, it can be used for good or for ill.
right.
The choice is ours.
And as we wrap up our exploration of Robert Greene's The Laws of Human Nature, I want to leave you with this question. What kind of influence do you want to have on the world?
That's a good question.
What legacy do you want to leave behind? The tools are there, the knowledge is there, the choice is yours.
It is. We were talking about Lyndon Johnson and how he was able to adapt his approach based on the situation. He could be charming one minute, tough the next.
Yeah, he was a master at kind of shifting his tactics to achieve his goals.
And that really speaks to this idea of having a flexible mind, which Green emphasizes throughout the book.
Right. It's not just about being stubborn and pushing your agenda all the time. It's about understanding when to push and when to pull back.
Exactly. And Green argues that as we age, our minds can become rigid, stuck in our ways, less open to new ideas and influences.
Yeah, I think we can all relate to that feeling of, getting set in our routines and beliefs as we get older.
Right. But how do we combat that? How do we keep our minds flexible, especially in a world that often feels increasingly polarized?
Yeah, it's like everyone's just digging in their heels and refusing to listen to anyone who disagrees with them.
Exactly. And that's where self-awareness comes in.
Uh-huh.
We need to recognize our own biases, our blind spots, and our resistance to change.
It's like the Socratic principle in action, right? The more we acknowledge what we don't know, the more open we become to learning.
Precisely. And Green suggests we actively seek out diverse perspectives, even those that challenge our own beliefs.
Oh, so it's not enough to just stay in our little echo chambers.
No, we need to be willing to step outside of our comfort zones and, really listen to what other people have to say.
Even if it makes us uncomfortable.
Even if it makes us uncomfortable. And Green actually quotes Nietzsche on this. He suggests that we approach new ideas with love and openness, giving them a fair hearing before we jump to conclusions.
It's so easy to just dismiss anything that contradicts our worldview.
It is, but that really limits our growth.
Yeah, because if we're not open to new information, then we're never going to change our minds or expand our understanding of the world.
Exactly. And Green pushes us even further. He encourages us to question our own self-opinion.
Oh, so are we truly as autonomous, intelligent, or good as we believe?
Right. It's a humbling exercise, but it's essential for personal growth and developing a more flexible mind.
And it's interesting because Lyndon B. Johnson, he was a master of influence, but he also had a reputation for being, kind of ruthless at times.
He did.
Yeah.
But his effectiveness stemmed from a genuine passion for the causes he championed.
Right, and I think people could sense that.
They could, and that's an important point. It's not just about mastering the techniques of influence. It's about aligning those techniques with our values and our purpose.
Right, so we're not just manipulating people for our own selfish gain.
No, we're using our influence to make a positive impact on the world.
And I think that's what makes Green's book so compelling. It's not just a how-to manual for getting what you want. It's really a guide for becoming a better, more influential person.
And a more self-aware person.
Exactly. And, as we wrap up this deep dive into the laws of human nature, I just want to leave our listeners with this question. What kind of influence do you want to have on the world?
Yeah, what legacy do you want to leave behind?
The tools are there, the knowledge is there, the choice is yours.
It is.
That's it for this deep dive into Robert Greene's The Laws of Human Nature. We hope you found it insightful and empowering, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive into a fascinating topic.